here has ever eaten a package of ramen noodles? Almost everyone, right? It's a staple of college food. We love it because it's cheap, it lasts forever, and it's tasty. There's only one drawback to ramen. Its high sodium content. One package contains almost 1.7 grams of sodium. Ramen is a great example of why the United States should regulate the amount of sodium in processed foods and restaurants. Most Americans consume too much sodium. The U.S. Department of Health and Human Services recommends that Americans aged 2 years and up eat less than 2.3 grams of sodium per day. People who are 51 years of age or older, any age African American, or those who have high blood pressure should consume even less, about 1.5 grams of sodium per day. That's less than a package of ramen. So how much do Americans actually consume? An eye-opening 2011 report by the National Center for Chronic Disease and Health Promotion shows that the average American eats 3.4 grams of sodium per day. But it's not because they can't put down the salt shaker. In 2009, a shocking statistic from the International Journal of Epidemiology revealed that 75% of the sodium Americans consume comes from processed foods and restaurants. Consuming too much sodium can be detrimental to our long-term health. Over time, it can increase the risk of heart disease and stroke. Dr. Thomas Frieden, director of the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, explained in a 2011 report from the National Center for Chronic Disease and Health Promotions that most Americans don't know that unseen sodium drives up their blood pressure, increasing the risk of heart disease and stroke, which are the first and third leading causes of death in the United States. In 2013, the Center for Disease Control reported that approximately 300,000 people die of heart disease each year and 120,000 die of stroke. If high levels of sodium consumption are so dangerous, there must be some sort of regulation, right? Not exactly. Under the current Food and Drug Administration regulations, sodium is categorized as a GRAS ingredient. GRAS stands for generally recognized as safe. Let me repeat that. It is generally recognized as safe. In addition, the FDA does require that sodium content be disclosed on every nutrition label. In 2010, the FDA publicly announced that it has chosen labeling to discourage high sodium intake rather than enforcing any sort of ingredient regulation. Many public health analysts and doctors believe otherwise. Michael Jacobson, executive director of the Center for Science in the Public Interest, said in a 2010 CNN report that limiting sodium in packaged and restaurant foods is perhaps the single most important thing the FDA can do to save lives and money. That same year, Cheryl Anderson, an epidemiologist at the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health, told the Washington Post, "We can't just rely on the individual to do something. Food manufacturers have to limit the amount of sodium in their products." The U.S. needs to change its policy from a labeling strategy to a regulating strategy. In 2010, the Committee on Strategies to Reduce Sodium Intake at the Institute of Medicine actually introduced a policy strategy for the FDA. It outlined 3 main points. First, the FDA should modify the GRAS status of sodium and mandate a reduction of sodium in processed foods and restaurants. Second, the FDA should update its provisions for nutrient labeling so Americans have a better idea of what they're consuming. Finally, government agencies like the FDA, the Department of Health and Human Services, and the Department of Agriculture should work alongside the food industry to promote a reduction of sodium in the food supply. Despite public outcry and a push for a policy strategy by the Institute of Medicine, the FDA has held its ground. It still believes that labeling, not regulating, is the best way to discourage high sodium intake. A strong supporter of the FDA's stance on sodium is the food industry itself. A New York Times article published by Michael Moss on May 29, 2010, explained why members of the food industry oppose sodium reduction. Food companies like sodium for the same reasons that we like ramen. Sodium is an inexpensive way to enhance flavor, it's a good preservative, and most Americans have an appetite for salty foods. Food companies also argue that decreasing sodium will increase their costs. In 2012, the National Center for Disease Control evaluated the cost effectiveness of interventions designed to reduce sodium intake. It found that the cost ranged from 3 to 32 cents per person. Let's assume it's 32 cents per person. If you multiply 0.32 by 300 million, the population of the United States, the cost comes out to be about $96 million. $96 million to reduce the amount of sodium in the food supply. Keep that number in mind. Although the FDA doesn't require any sort of ingredient regulation, some companies have voluntarily taken steps to reduce the amount of sodium in their products. In a 2010 Washington Post article by Lindsay Layton, Conagra, PepsiCo, Kraft, General Mills, Sara Lee, and many more also announced that they would reduce the amount of sodium in their products. Although some food processors have done so, the restaurant industry has not. In September of 2013, a study by the Journal of the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics found that the sodium levels of main entrees offered by over 210 American chain restaurants did not change from 2010 to 2011. Population analyst for the University of California, Davis, Helen Wu, conducted a study with similar results. In October of 2013, just over 2 months ago, she said, "Across the restaurant industry, we see a pattern of one step forward, one step back. Restaurants make changes to their menus regularly, but they make both healthy and unhealthy changes simultaneously." A nationwide reduction in sodium can save lives and money. In February of 2010, the New England Journal of Medicine predicted the outcome of sodium reduction using the coronary heart disease policy model, a computer simulation of heart disease in the US. The simulation predicted that a nationwide reduction in sodium of 1.2 grams per day is projected to reduce the annual number of new cases of heart disease by 60,000 and the number of cases of stroke by 32,000. The simulation included all age groups, races, and sexes. According to a 2012 report by Dr. Darwin Labarth of the Department of Health and Human Services, the federal government currently spends $273 billion a year on the treatment of heart disease and stroke alone. $273 billion. The coronary heart disease policy model predicts that a nationwide reduction in sodium, once again of just 1.2 grams per day, could save the federal government $10 to $24 billion a year. This would easily make up for the $96 million it would cost to reduce sodium in the food supply. A nationwide reduction in sodium has already taken place in the United Kingdom. In 2002, the Food Standards Agency of Britain established a nationwide reduction of sodium intake to 2.4 grams per day. Over the course of the past 10 years, they've slowly been reducing the amount of sodium in processed foods and restaurants. The daily intake 10 years ago was about 3.2 grams for the average Brit. It's currently at 2.6, and they've almost reached their goal of 2.4 grams of sodium per day. As a result, the Food Standards Agency has reported that the reduction in sodium has saved approximately 8,500 lives and currently saves their federal government 1.5 billion pounds per year. In conclusion, most Americans consume too much sodium and it has a detrimental impact on their health. The FDA needs to change its policy from a labeling strategy to a regulating strategy. Voluntary action by food companies is not enough. The coronary heart disease policy model predicts that a nationwide reduction in sodium can save thousands of lives and billions of dollars a year. The United Kingdom has already proven that this is possible. Lives are at stake. But at the very least, let's hope the United States regulates the amount of sodium in ramen before we graduate. Thank you.